Ever wish you could find a circle of successful business owners who just openly share what they did to get where they are? Challenges, perspectives, tough decisions, the good, the bad, the strategies, what worked and what definitely didn't? Because if you could, that would make your journey as CEO of your own small business 1,000,000 times easier and less lonely. Welcome to Reaching Abundance. This is the only podcast where you get weekly cliff notes about developing mental fortitude from successful business owners who have positioned their podcast as the marketing arm of their business. I'm your host, Virginia Elder, fellow business owner and abundance enthusiast. Listening to this show will help you step up, play big, avoid pitfalls, and shift into a growth mindset as you build and market your business and pursue your own definition of abundance. Hey there, Virginia here, back with another solo episode answering some of your most frequently asked questions about podcasting. In the prior episode, I highlighted the difference between just having a YouTube channel versus podcasting. I explained what podcasting really is, and I shared what you need to get started, whether you're going audio only or recording video as well. One of the biggest issues I see in business owners' podcasts is the lack of action-oriented language or even intention to drive clients into their business. When I speak to said business owners, the conversation often starts with a complaint of some sort about not getting clients from their show or the lack of traction from their show. But when I dive into the details, there are some key mindset and actual components of the podcast missing. If you don't tell people exactly what you want them to do, they'll do nothing. You can't hint, hope, insinuate, or intend. Your potential clients aren't mind readers. So as you're designing your new show or reevaluating your existing podcast, ensure the components discussed throughout this episode are included and ultra clear. If you have a podcast and aren't getting the traction, followers, or clients you want from it, and are having a hard time evaluating it yourself, I mean, let's just be honest, we are all too close to our craft, so it is okay to need help in building your business or in building your show. So you're invited to sign up for a podcast audit with me so I can personally evaluate your show. I'll provide a complete report with action steps you can fix immediately. First, let's address the fact that podcasts are not saturated. You may have heard this assumption lately or felt like everybody's launching a podcast, but there is a ton of space in this medium still, especially for high quality, action-oriented niche shows that will really give a listener pointed guidance. There's great opportunity not to produce, quote unquote, just another interview podcast, and instead to really create something with unique segments and styles specific to you and what you know would be great for your ideal audience, listeners, or potential clients. Let's look at some numbers. There are 1.1 billion with a B websites and 114 million YouTube channels, yet there are only 4 million podcasts. You and I both know, sure, there's a ton of websites, a ton of YouTube channels, and podcasts that are just existing out there. They're old, they're outdated, there's not been a new episode, nobody's touched them for years. So when we add a filter for what we're going to consider an active channel, we're automatically cutting upwards of 80% of the competition on every platform. So if we narrow things down and just look at active channels, there are only 194 million websites, 22.8 million YouTube channels, and 156,000 active podcasts. Notice million, and then thousand, right? So big difference here. Now take it a step further and let's estimate how many of these are just in your specific niche. So we're really narrowing it down to what you could consider your actual competition, even though I guarantee you there's still space to create your own unique show. As an example, I primarily serve financial service professionals. So that includes financial coaches, financial advisors and planners, CPAs, tax advisors, specialists in the financial realm, whether we're talking about budgeting or investing or estate planning. If this show talks about money, I want to be the producer. So financial shows are only 13% of the total online content produced, meaning as a financial service professional, you're only in competition with 25 million websites, 2.9 million YouTube channels, and 20,000 podcasts. Think about as you're building your business. I bet you put no thought whatsoever into needing a business website. It's a no-brainer. You've got to have a website. So if it's a hands down, no questions asked, yes to playing in the same playground as 25 million other websites in your niche, don't you see the fabulous odds of standing out, reaching your ideal audience, and nurturing a community around your brand using a podcast? Your odds of standing out in a pool of 20,000 podcasts is much better than trying to stand out with your website. This is why podcasts are still growing in popularity among business owners and listeners. This industry is still in its infancy, and while it may take 70 or more episodes to really feel like you're building a following, that's just because it takes people a little while to find you. It's actually pretty dang easy to get started on the right foot and stand out. Now that you know you can stand out and there's much less competition than on other platforms, here's how you ensure your show converts listeners into clients. You follow this acronym, CRAFT, C-R-A-F-T. The C stands for content. The R stands for repurpose. The A stands for ask. The F stands for feature. And the T stands for track, C-R-A-F-T, craft. First, let's talk about your content. Your content has to be targeted topics your audience or your listeners or your potential clients actually want to hear about. Every topic, title, and segment within your show should directly address a singular pain point your ideal client is feeling. A great way to do this is to craft episode topics around frequently asked questions, topics that maybe people don't want to talk about out loud, like maybe kind of touchy subjects, and around highly searched phrases in your niche. One way to find topics to discuss on your show is to pull up Google and type in a question you know they have or that you think your potential clients might have. A financial planner or advisor might get questions all the time around which debt is good or bad and whether to invest in real estate or the market, or perhaps which investment types are the best for tax advantages. Maybe you have a tax strategist or a CPA do a segment with you to answer those questions. So as you approach your content with this frequently asked questions or hard to ask questions lens, you'll automatically start generating ideas around what you would say and or who you could have on your show to do a segment with you addressing this pain point. The point of this section about content is that every episode should give the listener something precise to walk away with. You're going to walk away from this episode with the acronym CRAFT. You can take notes on this. You can replay it. You can write it on your whiteboard and you can follow these instructions. So mimic me if you have to and create acronyms or create clear instructions. Work on your content being an answer to a specific question or an order of operations or a set of values they can reflect on once your episode is over. Let's get into the R, repurpose. One huge way you can effectively and efficiently tweak podcasting to further solidify your client acquisition process is through repurposing. Embrace the possibility of creating the content once and then reusing pieces and concepts from that single episode anywhere else someone could possibly find it. Not everyone is going to jump on their podcast app right away and search for you. Not everyone will know that you're even creating a podcast, even though you feel like you're talking about it constantly. And believe it or not, there are still people who don't even know how to use their podcast app. So it's super important that you're also posting content on other platforms. This is where video does us some favors and helps us have content for YouTube, and we can chop YouTube videos into reels, post them on Instagram, on YouTube as shorts. So take a step back for a second. I've met very motivated business owners who have this idea of becoming omnipresent, who want to post content on every platform and seem like they're everywhere all the time. They approach it through the lens of, well, first I'll write a blog post and then I can adjust that into a script. And then I'll pull the main points out of it and record a podcast episode. And then I can make a reel covering each of those main points for those 5 reels. So that's 5 days a week. And it's like, it just gets crazy. I'm already exhausted thinking through that thought process. Flip everything. You are creating the podcast episode first. Make a few adjustments so you can video yourself at the same time. And then either you or your trusted editor can pull things out for repurposing. You've got AI in your back pocket these days. It could at least highlight clips for you and suggest pieces to repurpose, to chop your videos into reels, to help generate blog post ideas based on your podcast episode. Pull out quotes that you can make into carousels using Canva. Yes, it is still a lot of work, but when you create that base pillar content one time and then pull all the other pieces from that, it's a lot easier than creating multiple pieces for multiple platforms, basically from scratch, rather than just using what you've already made one time. Now, if you're using AI, of course, I always suggest checking it, changing some wording so it sounds like something you'd really say. But I mean, the tools and the simplicity and the possibility is definitely out there. When it comes to repurposing your recordings into reels, into YouTube shorts, blog posts, and basically anything else you'd want, that is a service we offer in our full production packages. So our clients are truly just the talent of their show, and everything after they record is completely hands-off on their part. We take the episode from that recording date. We use our own discernment on what to cut, what filters should be applied to tweak the tone just right, and what conversational edits should be made. We write show notes. We do all of the things all the way until publish. So as a podcast host doing business with Podcast Abundance, everything's done for you. You get to just run your business. You get to create your content once, like we just talked about. This saves you hours of work each week and increases the number of eyeballs and ears on your content, and it's all done for you. Now, the third letter in the acronym CRAFT is A. This stands for ask. You must ask people to do what you want them to do. You have to ask for the sales. You have to have a clear call to action. This is the number one thing I find missing from podcast episodes. As a business owner, I want you to have a very simple funnel created. It starts with a lead magnet that helps you collect email addresses and build your list. Then there's a series of emails that nurture those subscribers. Then there's at least one product that your fans and followers can purchase by themselves, automatically, click of a button. This is the most basic funnel and bare minimum you must have to begin to make online sales from rando listeners or rando viewers on YouTube. Whether you choose to tell listeners about your free thing or your low ticket thing or your highest ticket big bad coaching offer is completely up to you, but you have to be asking for the sale. The thing is, there are rules around this. You get one ask per episode. You have to pick one thing you're going to ask them to do. You can mention that call to action a few times throughout your episode, but it has to be the same name and link and the same product through all of those call to actions in each episode. And since people don't generally take action the first time they hear something, I want you to keep the same call to action for a minimum of 8 episodes before you change it. So you get to ask for what you want about 24 times before you change your target product or freebie or whatever it is that you're asking them to do. Think like an online shopper for a moment. That's basically what your podcast listeners or YouTube viewers are. Is it more likely that you'll sign up for a package or a program that's several $1,000s from some random creator that you just stumbled across? Or is it more likely that you'll sign up for their free PDF that is supposed to help you with something immediately? Probably the free download, right? Yeah, because it's risk-free. All you have to do is provide your email address. But then after you get value from that free thing and what was promised is delivered, you start getting emails from this business owner and you like them and you can't wait to hear their next episode. And since you're hearing them and seeing them on video each week, you're building trust with them. And eventually you're ready to make a bigger purchase. This is why having your funnel is important. All you have to do is quote unquote sell your free download. The sentences you use to talk about the benefits the listener or viewer will receive from your free download are really important. And what you tell them to do on how to get it is your call to action. Structure the intro to your episode to include a call to action. Create a commercial for your free download to be placed in the first 20% of your episode, and include that call to action in your outro. So that's 3 times within your episode. You just need to do 8 episodes using that same call to action 3 times before you change it. Remember, no one knows about your free thing or any of your products for that matter unless you talk about them. And if you're not talking about it, they're never going to sign up for it. And if they never sign up for it or they aren't on your email list, then they can't buy anything from your email sequence. If you're not sold on the whole email list and subscriber thing, and that's like a foreign territory to you, consider this. 50% of email users, which when you think about like how many people use email, it's like everybody, right? It's like billions of people. 50% of them make a purchase off of an email once a month. 23% of those billions of people buy something from an email in their inbox once a week. So to convert listeners and viewers into clients, you must have a call to action in every episode. You have to make the ask. The last thing I'll say on that is your call to action has to be one step, super simple and really obvious. If you're directing them to a link and there's a button they should click, literally tell them, click the blue button in the center of the page, or look for the yellow button on the left, or whatever it is. Just make it super obvious, because they are not going to dig, click around, or spend even 2 extra seconds trying to figure out what the heck they're supposed to do. Make it so clear that a 4th grader could do it. Most of the time, when someone complains they aren't getting traction from their show or that listeners aren't converting, I find either 0 calls to action, or I find uncompelling or complicated calls to action. If I have to scroll all the way down to the bottom of your webpage to find a button, or I have to go from your IG link to 6 options on your link tree and pick one, or if I have to go to your website and follow the menu into like resources and then downloads, and then this list of like 5 different PDFs I could pick from pops up, like I'm just not clicking anything. I'm going to exit as fast as possible because it's way too many steps and way too complicated. That's the problem. So take this information in this ask section and audit yourself. Are you including a call to action? Are you being clear with your call to action? And is your call to action simple? If not, let's get to work. Now, we spent a considerable amount of time on that section because that is the area where I find the most issues. So let's move on. We're working through our acronym CRAFT, C-R-A-F-T. The F stands for feature. Consider featuring experts and guests through interesting segments or interviews. I mentioned earlier in the show, there are plenty of just interview podcasts. So when you think about featuring a guest or an expert or a co-host or whatever, be curious about how you might be able to feature the information delivered and shed them in the best light. A big perk of hosting your own show is that you have a platform on which you can invite people to share their expertise. Going back to your ideal clients' frequently asked questions and biggest pain points, think about referral partners and what I call parallel providers, people who your ideal client might also buy from. A couple of examples. One of my clients is a tax strategist for business owners making $1 million or more in revenue. His guest list includes therapists, nutritionists, high-end health practitioners, life insurance experts, attorneys, investment advisors, and estate planners. These are all practices and people that business owners making $1 million or more in revenue per year also need. They need his tax strategy, and they need a nutritionist and a sleep coach and an insurance advisor and all of these things because of the lifestyle required by that level of ownership. Another client is a financial advisor who mostly does solo episodes, but occasionally has guests on about tax issues, estate planning, local law changes that affect people's finances, senior living, and even insurance. Each of these clients has thought about the parallel services needed by their clients and strategically introduced their audience to those experts. The beauty of having guests on your show, even occasionally, is the networking effect that occurs within the podcast space. You and your guest have the opportunity to expose each other to each other's respective audiences, effectively growing each other's reach. So you can see this collaborative concept coming to the surface here. When you think about featuring someone, who would you like to have on your show? And how would that help your listeners or viewers? All right, so we are almost through this acronym, CRAFT, that spells craft. T stands for track. You have to track your metrics and feedback. The final piece in knowing without a doubt if your podcast is effective at client acquisition requires data. But not all metrics are worthwhile. Your total listens number, for example, is a vanity metric just as much as the number of likes on an Instagram post. It means nothing. Numbers that matter include the number of listens per episode, percentage completion of each episode, click-through rates to the links that you've shared in your calls to action, traffic to your call to action web pages, and how people are finding your show or which apps or devices they're listening from. Listens per episode is important to track because A, you can see this number increasing over time, indicating more people are listening to your show, and B, because it's obvious when you hit on a hot topic and your listens are double or triple for that episode. You can then examine what you talked about, going back to the letter C that stands for content, and you can create additional content. This borrows from the R for repurposing, and you create additional content around that topic that your listeners obviously appreciated. The percentage completion of each episode can be found inside your Apple Podcast Creator account. This is important because you can see when people drop off during your episode. When you can pinpoint a strong drop-off point and go back to evaluate what was happening just before or just after that moment, you can track it back to, okay, maybe the conversation got kind of bland at that moment. Maybe people don't like my commercial because it just aired. Maybe this topic became unclear during this moment. Maybe the episode isn't delivering fast enough on the promise that was said at the very beginning. This just signals some tweaks need to be made. It doesn't mean people don't like you or won't come back, but it's just feedback, constructive criticism, if you will. Click-through rates and traffic to the pages where you're sending them using your call to action is a clear measurement of how many people are actually doing what you asked. If the click-through rates or the traffic is low to those pages, perhaps the way you're speaking about your offer isn't compelling. Or maybe you're talking about the logistics of the offer instead of the benefits they'd receive from following your suggested action. That's one piece where I see people struggle with that call to action. Make sure you're speaking to your audience about the benefits they'll receive. When you look at tracking how people are finding your show and which devices they're listening from, this is important because you could actually lean in to interacting on those specific platforms. This information is generally found inside your podcast host account. So, for example, if most people are listening from their computer, maybe they're finding you through a simple Google search, which is great news. Like maybe your website is coming up on the first page for some keyword that they're searching for. But you can dig in to your website analytics and to your podcast and figure out where they're coming from, which pages are the most active on your website, how long are they hanging out on those pages. And from there, you have the opportunity to optimize those pages, make sure your freebies pop up, and make sure there are calls to action so you can direct them into a course or your next mastermind or whatever it is. If listeners are tuning in primarily from Spotify, you can log in to your Spotify creator account, and it actually gives you an option to post a question beneath each of your episodes. So that's a great opportunity for on-platform audience engagement where they're already hanging out. Like, let's say Spotify is your top platform where people listen to your show. If your entire audience is already there, why not engage with them where they are? Along the same vein, if your listenership is primarily on Apple, you can focus on Apple-specific features like their ratings and reviews. And you can use language in your social media posts and even in your podcast talking about rating and reviewing your show on Apple because you know that's where all of your listeners are hanging out. There's a platform-specific way you can engage with an audience no matter where or how they're consuming your content. It's a good idea to lean into that because it shows them that you're a real human, that you're actually there, that you really care, and that you're paying attention to where they're listening from. In closing, let's review the most important factors to gaining clients from your podcast. Remember the acronym CRAFT. I know I've mentioned it several times. C stands for content, R stands for repurpose, A stands for ask, F stands for feature, and T stands for track. Yes, you need to do all 5 of these. If you aren't doing any of them and feel the need to completely evaluate your show, tear it down so that you can rebuild it, don't get overwhelmed. Go through these one at a time, implement changes one at a time to your show. When you decide that you need a trusted third party to look at your show and evaluate your content, your repurposing tactics, your calls to action, the guests that you're featuring on your show or the segments that you're offering, and even to review some of your stats with you and point out some things that I see as an industry expert, schedule a podcast audit with me. For business owners with an existing show, this is the first step to working together anyways. I have to evaluate your craft so I can create a strategy for you to follow that will help you reach your goals. The link to sign up for an audit is in the show notes, and my month is basically full already, so sign up today so that the earliest availability on my calendar is yours. I'm really excited to help you get unstuck in your client acquisition process and help you use your podcast effectively as the marketing arm for your business. As this episode comes to a close, I'd love to know which piece of this conversation made an impact on you. Send a message to me at reachingabundance.com/convo. For your convenience, the link is in the episode description. This show is edited and published on YouTube and all podcast apps by podcastabundance.com, and we are taking clients. When you're ready to effectively and efficiently market your business using a podcast, book a call with me by clicking the Book a Call link in the episode description. Thank you for spending your time with me and listening to Reaching Abundance. I'm your host, Virginia Elder. I'll be back next week with another amazing guest to help you build your business, navigate mindset shifts, establish growth-oriented habits, and effectively leverage online marketing. In the meantime, keep up with me and my guests on Instagram at Podcast Abundance.